Oh, ho, 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 ho. Damon Lindelof, how I have missed you.
Don't change the channel. Don't touch that dial. We got it all on UHF. Take off your sneakers.
Hey guys, it's Counting in my review for the series premiere of Watchmen, Season 1, Episode 1. It's summer and we're running out of ice, and holy shit, I can't believe the show has finally come out. You guys know this was my most anticipated show of the entire year, probably the most anticipated of all time. Not just because of, the fact that Damon Lindelof was behind it, though that was definitely a very big reason, but it's also because Watchmen is a series that I think is very interesting. I think it's one that people have wanted to be a TV series for a while, and just in general, knowing that was coming out on HBO, all that kind of stuff, I was anxiously awaiting it, but I was also trying to keep my hype levels as low as possible, because as much as I was hyped out of my mind for it, I knew that if I was anticipating it too much, then it would end up disappointing me. So I went in knowing that this wasn't going to be The Leftovers, it was going to be something much different, and Lindelof even said in interviews, like, this isn't going to be like The Leftovers, it's more on the level of Lost or something like that, which I'm definitely down for. I think definitely, creators should push themselves and try to do something different. So, I went into this first episode, and all I can really say is that Damon Lindelof is absolutely back. He is absolutely done again. This show was pretty much everything I wanted to be and more. Thank God I can say that. Oh, what a relief. But let's just dive into this episode. There is a lot to talk about for sure. So I think the first thing I'm really going to dive into is really all of the actors here. I mean, this show is so well casted. It really is a star-studded cast all across the board, and I think everyone did a fantastic job, but easily the big standout is Regina King, who I'm so happy to see is working with Damon Lindelof again, and she just completely anchors this entire show as our character of Angela Abar, someone who really is kind of, not, I wouldn't say she is the audience, but in the sense that, like, she's facing all of the things that the audience is, in the sense that she has to deal with all the real world issues, but she's also participating in a lot of the, in a lot of the combat that's going on, and I think that's what makes Angela such a compelling character. But King is just so, is so magnificent in this role, as she always is, but what I think she does so well as Angela Barr is that this is someone who is seemingly, being affected by what's going on. She has had tons of tragedy and things like that, but she's also very heavily participated in what's going on. She's going after the 7th Cavalry and all that kind of stuff, which we'll get into, but I think she just did a phenomenal job here. I love what she's doing in this role, particularly when she's Sister Knight. I mean, going from that caring mother and wife that, just seems very devoted and really is doing what she can to try to keep her family safe, and then being this almost merciless vigilante is just amazing to watch, and King just really channels all of that so well here, and I think is definitely going to be one of the best things about the show. I can already see her giving one of the best performances of the year, and probably getting another Emmy nomination for it, because I think she was fantastic here. But aside from her, I mean, the rest of the cast also is really great. Don Johnson, even though, yes, we'll talk about what's unfortunate with his character, he did a fantastic job in this episode. You see how Crawford is someone who really is trying to unite the whole community, who's really is doing what he can to just keep everything together amidst all the chaos and things like that, and I really did love him here for sure. Tim Blake Nelson is maybe the best I've ever seen him. I mean, he is he's so good in the show, but he also is so menacing and really is quite scary at times. I mean, just especially in that one interrogation scene alone, you really do see just him going all out and just how set he is on just completely destroying the 7th Cavalry. You really do see that. I think that is eventually going to corrupt him, but Tim Blake Nelson is doing such an incredible job here. Those really are the 3 big standouts, I would say, of this first episode. There are definitely other standouts for sure. Jeremy Irons did not have a lot to do, but I'm sure he is going to be magnificent for sure. I did like what we saw of Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. I mean, he definitely did a good job as Angela's husband, but those 3 really did anchor this first episode. They really were the big, I would say, standouts of this show, and definitely was one of the best things about it for sure. So with that out of the way, I guess we'll just get into it. There's a lot to really talk about in this show, but I think the main thing I want to talk about is how Lindelof approached something like this, because Watchmen is a very dense work. Watchmen is something that has been highly beloved. It's been acclaimed as one of the greatest comic books of all time, and I think Lindelof made a very wise decision in not trying to recreate it. Essentially, what he's doing is that the events of Watchmen have taken place, and now we're seeing how those events are playing out in modern times. And I think that was a brilliant idea, mainly because, yes, the characters of Rorschach, Dr. Manhattan, those characters are around in this show. They're not around anymore, but they were once around. I mean, in the, in canonically, what happened in those comics did happen in this show, and I think that was definitely the right way to go about it. And just seeing the ways that these groups have been almost negatively influenced by what has happened, especially when it comes to Rorschach, I think is one of the biggest points of this episode. And I think people are really misunderstanding what the show is going for here, because I don't think they're necessarily saying that, like, the 7th Cavalry is completely bad and that the cops are completely right. Yes, the 7th Cavalry is going about things in completely the wrong way. I mean, right in this first episode alone, you see that they're completely misinterpreted what Rorschach is doing, and people now kind of see Rorschach as this negative sort of figure, and I don't think that's at all what he was trying to do. I think Rorschach was trying to unite people. I think he was trying to fix things, but because of the fact that it was in writing, people completely misinterpreted what he's doing. Now we have this white supremacist-esque group that is going after, all of these cops and things like that, and is going after all these people, and clearly they have something brewing. We don't know what that's really about. So yeah, they've definitely misinterpreted, but I also think that applies to the cops as well, because they feel that it is their duty to just go after all of the 7th Cavalry. And we're already seeing how, even though, yes, they are in the right for doing that because of all the dastardly things that the 7th Cavalry has clearly done. I mean, we see in this one episode how just savage they are with almost assassinating that one cop. They don't actually assassinate him, and it's attempted, but it doesn't actually work out. But that definitely does show why they are justified. But we also do see scenes like where Tim Blake Nelson's character is heavily interrogating, this alleged member of the 7th Cavalry, who, even when he says he's not a member, and he keeps saying he's not a member, he still is, hard pressed. He still is doing whatever he can to get to the bottom of things. He doesn't believe this guy. And again, yes, we can assume that he's a part of the 7th Cavalry, but let's just say he wasn't. And I do think that's something the show is already kind of examining, the idea of, vengeance. And I think that's something that really is going to cripple Nelson's character. I mean, his character is one that I'm already very intrigued by. Looking Glass, you can see, again, that yes, while he does feel he is doing right, I think eventually this is going to get him. And the same goes for Sister Night. I mean, we see that, yes, Angela is very protective of, her cops, because these are, her family in a sense. We've especially seen that with Don Johnson's character. I mean, these guys are very close, and you can see that she's taking this very personally, but the fact that she just straight up, wants to massacre all of the 7th Cavalry as well, even though, yes, she is in the right for what she's doing, I think we're already seeing how this could very well end up sending her over the edge, and this could very well end up, making her almost turn out as bad as they are. And I don't know if the show's going in that direction, but that's definitely one of the things that Watchmen always explored, is the moral gray areas of people. And that's something I think the show did very well. Even characters like Angela, like I said, they're not always presented as, always good or always bad. And that's something that I definitely really did love about this first episode. Something else I do have to talk about, though, which I don't really want to talk about, is all of the controversy that, the show is too political, the show's going full SJW. Here's the thing. Watchmen came out in the 80s, and a lot of people forget that the comic came out in the 80s, and what was the main conflict that was going on there? Well, yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on with the comedian's death and things like that, but a lot of it was dealing with the Cold War and the fear that Russia was going to end up overtaking, the United States and things like that. That was a big fear in the graphic novel, and that's because that was very timely in the 80s. And yeah, we read it now and we see it as, it's a piece of history, but that was timely then. So it makes perfect sense that here the same applies, where we're dealing with things like Black Lives Matter and white supremacists and all these different sort of ethnic groups, because that is a very huge issue going on today. And I think that was a very smart thing to tackle. And I think especially starting off with something as tragic as the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, where all of these, people of color are just completely decimated, which is something that is not talked about enough. I don't really hear a lot of people talk about this massacre, sadly, which it very much should be studied, just so we can make sure that nothing like it ever happens again, but also to examine how something like this could have ever taken place. I think it was a very wise choice. It perfectly gets you into the mood of the show. It shows that they're not going to hold back, and I think they did a really good job with that here. And they're not just focusing on the politics. That's the thing. Yes, while the politics is a big part of it, that's not all of what the show is about. We have that threat of the 7th Cavalry. We presented them as a threat quite well, but there clearly is also something looming. I mean, when Crawford dies, which I was shocked about, and I have to say, the show did an excellent job with that, in building up to his death, really not making you think that they would kill this character, because he seemed like he was going to be one of the main leads for sure. I mean, the fact that he was so active in everything, his relationship with Angela, but in reality, the whole episode was getting us to really care for these two, so when he dies, you really do feel something. That clearly shows that there's something more going on. I don't think this was just a random 7th Cavalry attack. I think there was far more that Crawford was involved in that we don't know yet, and that's something I'm very excited in getting into, is what's really going on there. I think there's a much deeper conspiracy at play, and I think that's something that this episode very well does entertain the idea of quite well. But again, going back to it, I don't think this was too political at all. I think it's a really dumb complaint. I think that's always been a big theme of Watchmen, is to take real life politics and apply it to this world, a world that, is devoid of electronics, a world where Robert Redford is president, which, if you listen very carefully, I heard the name Ford. When Angela's kids are reciting all the presidents, they say the name Ford before him, so I don't know if we're going to get more into that, but I'm wondering if they're talking about, like Henry Ford, or like which Ford are they referring to here? What's really going on there? There's clearly more going on with those politics that we don't know about either. We see people are really hating on Robert Redford as a president, so there's a lot they can really take this show, and I think it's far more than just these specific issues. I think there's a lot more going on that we don't know about yet, and I think that's something the show has yet to reveal, but I think it does a great job of really hooking you in and really getting us to understand this world. The world building right from this first episode alone, I thought was fantastic. The way we established the different factions, the fact that these cops have to literally cover themselves up and have to be these vigilantes just because they have that fear that the 7th Cavalry is coming after them, I think is very interesting. But the other thing that really does definitely hook me in is that if you noticed, when the attack first happens to the one cop, Crawford basically says, this is happening again. Basically that the 7th Cavalry have backed off for a while, like it hasn't been an issue until now. So I'm wondering, how long has this been a thing? We know there was some event called White Night. We don't know what that really was, at least we're meant to believe that. That's what Angela was discussing in her, son's classroom when he got into that fight with that kid. She was talking about something called White Night, so clearly there's something more going on with the 7th Cavalry that we don't know about, and I'm very excited. I'm excited, but I'm also very intrigued to dive more into this group. I think there's a lot more at play here than we know, and I'm excited to see what they really end up doing there. Now, a few other things I do want to talk about in regards to the Tulsa, Oklahoma opening. While I do think it is a very shocking and a fantastic way to start things off. I mean, I've always said Lindelof works best with like these one-off type sequences. It really did remind me, even though I know he's not trying to make it like The Leftovers, it really did make me harken back to like the season 2 opening of The Leftovers, where you had that like 10-minute sequence of just the woman and her baby, and her dying, and this other mother like having to raise her baby. Or in season 3, when you had the colony of people thinking that the rapture was coming, and then you realize that they were wrong and the woman's family abandoned her. Lindelof has always excelled at these kind of openings, and he definitely did not disappoint here. And just the whole opening alone of this boy, his whole family just being shot in this deadly massacre, and him now having to take on this son, I think is very effective, but I don't think it's random. I think unlike The Leftovers, which always did relate back to what was going on, but never did connect into the main narrative, I actually do think there's a possibility this could. I think that the man in the wheelchair could very well end up being one of the boys that we saw in that flashback. I don't know if it's the boy who raised the baby or if it is the baby. I'm not entirely sure. But I do think that there is a possibility that the old man in the wheelchair could be connected to that. I definitely could see that happening. I don't think that's a random coincidence. And, you know, Angela even says in, like, the promo for the next episode, like, he's, like, 90-something years old. So I feel like it does line up pretty well. And even though, yes, the actor playing him was born in the early 30s, I do think it is plausible that this could very well be a thing. I mean, if you remember, one of the things he does say to her is that he wants to live to, like, you know, 200 or something like that, because he does have one other interaction with her when Angela's going to that bakery. So there's definitely something else with this character, and I think that might be tied to the massacre. Again, I might just be overthinking it. I do this quite often, especially when it comes to Lindelof shows. But I do think there is a possibility that there is some sort of a connection there. I don't think this is just a random coincidence, but I guess we'll just have to see what happens. So again, I think I talked about all the major things that really happened in this episode, and again, something that Lindelof did such a great job with, though, in this episode are just the details, and it's very similar to The Leftovers, where the littlest thing, like Crawford going to see Oklahoma, something that seems so insignificant, ends up being one of the most significant parts of the entire episode, because once he starts singing, there's that clock that starts ticking, and you know that something is going to go down. Now, again, it could be connected to the 7th Cavalry, because in their video message, they kept saying tick-tock, tick-tock, so it could be connected to that, but it also may not be, and again, that just shows how great Lindelof is at building tension, but especially in the interrogation scene. I mean, that entire scene is just two people talking, and the way that Lindelof made it so riveting in that way, and just had us on the edge of our seat, not knowing what could happen if, you know, Tim Blake Nelson's character was just gonna kill that guy right then and there. I mean, you had no idea what was gonna go down there, and I think he just did such a phenomenal job with constructing that sequence, and it's stuff like that that just makes me so happy that Lindelof took on this show. I think he has just such a unique vision, and it really does loom throughout the entire episode. Even though, yes, again, this is a much different show, I can definitely see Lindelof's style here, where, again, his visual cues and that stuff are all very much present here, and that's something I really did appreciate about this, and the kind of story he's trying to tell about these morally gray individuals, I think is a genius move, and I think it's a genius approach of what he's doing here for sure. And I think the show did such a great job that even smaller characters that didn't really play a big role here, like, say, you know, characters like, say, Pirate Jenny or the character of Panda, everyone left some kind of an impression on me. Even, I would say, Angela's son, Topher, definitely left an impression on me. And I think that's something they did an excellent job of. With a show this dense with so many characters, it can be hard to figure out how to introduce them all, but I think overall, Lindelof did an excellent job with that here. But I also have to say something else I really appreciated, and this is something else that Lindelof has talked about. I know I love to talk about what he said in interviews and things like that, but I'm sorry, Lindelof is a very fascinating individual. I love the way he thinks, I love getting into his head, but he talked about how he didn't want to reuse the same composer. He didn't want to use Max Richter again for this show because he wanted to challenge himself. And I think it's a brilliant idea to get someone like Trent Reznor for this show, who has such a unique vision of his own when it comes to music. But his electronic score really did heighten the tension here. I think it fits so well into the show, especially in the interrogation scene. I think that was so great. But also just music choices alone is something Lindelof has always been the master of, is just knowing what songs to pick. And him playing Poor Judd Is Dead at the end. And again, kind of presenting Oklahoma as a red herring, which you wouldn't even be able to tell from that first scene. It's just genius. And I love things like that. I love the way he was able to construct that here for sure. Just so much great stuff going on technical wise. Cinematography, I mean, they really went all out. That shootout scene especially, incredibly grisly, and really to show the show is not going to hold back. Yes, the movie was very violent for sure, but the movie's violence was very comic book-like. This show is going for something far more realistic and far more grounded in that sense, and that's something I really do appreciate about, is that yes, the movie I think is very well done, but the movie still has a comic book-like feel. That's not the case with this show. This show is doing something different entirely, and I love that. I love that Lindelof is not just trying to, make a comic book show. He's doing something that's based off a comic book property, but he's putting it in a far more grounded reality and not the heightened reality we expect to see from these type of comic book properties. And I think that's something that he's doing an excellent job. I mean, even something as recent as Joker behind me still did feel like a heightened reality. Watchmen so far doesn't really feel that way. This feels like it could be similar to, even though, yes, it is 2019, if this situation were to happen, I do think that this could very well end up being, what ends up going down. I think this is very similar to what our world would be like if, let's just say, Robert Redford was still president for like 19 years, or if, the Seventh Cavalry was a real thing, or if the Watchmen existed. I think this is a very, I think this is definitely a very, clear vision of what this could end up be like. I think this is a very realistic look at that for sure, and I just think Lindelof did an excellent job constructing that here. Look, I know a lot of this is just me jerking off Lindelof as a creator, but I do have to say credit is also due to Nicole Castle, who did the directing here, who I think did an excellent job with just setting the tone for the show. Like I said, it's very gritty, but there's even some traces of humor, and that's something that Lindelof definitely did mention in an interview, is that something he's learned from The Leftovers is that he didn't want to make this incredibly dark. So while, yes, it is a very dark show, there are still moments of just very dark humor, like the moment where, Angela's talking to her son, and her son says, oh, they're not a racist, and Angela's like, oh, but they're off to a good start. Like, little moments like that is really great, and I think Castle just did a really great job with handling the source material in a very elegant manner, doing her own thing, and I was very impressed by her directing in this show. I think definitely it was very intense, it was very appropriate, and I'm excited to see where she goes. I don't know if she directs every single episode this season. I think she directs at least a good majority of them, but I think overall she did a really good job directing here. So again, I've gone on long enough about it, what I love about the show. I think I've praised it to death. Is there anything that didn't work in this episode for me? Well, yes, there's one thing that just didn't really work here, and I understand it's gonna have a purpose, but Jeremy Irons' character, Lord of the County Mantor, who I do think is probably Ozymandias, even though they haven't confirmed it, I think it's pretty obvious that he is Ozymandias. It's not that I don't understand why it's in this show. I completely understand why it's here. It's just, I don't know where this is going. I really don't. I'm intrigued for sure. This idea that you have this guy who, is in this county manor, and he's just really weird overall. I mean, he's like, he still uses a typewriter. He's just basking naked in his home, having like his maid like massage his thighs and things like that. And then he comes up with like this play he wants to put on. So we don't really know where this is going, but Tom Mison and Sarah Vickers are doing an excellent job in those roles for sure. And Jeremy Irons, I mean, already is killing it. We haven't seen much of him. I'm sure we're going to see more of him for sure, but I don't really know where this is headed. But again, I do think that this is very clearly going to be revealed to be Adrian Veidt. I do think that is where they're going to take it, and it makes sense because he essentially did start this whole thing. He's the reason why all of this did take place. He falsified Dr. Manhattan as like this terrorist. Everyone thinks that Dr. Manhattan was responsible for what happened. Nobody, because of that, Ozymandias has gotten off pretty much scot-free, and I think we're going to see what that has really done to him. He's now living in seclusion. He doesn't seem to really have any worries whatsoever. He's a very rich man. He doesn't have to deal with any of this stuff, but I do think that he is controlling it. I think he might have, I don't know if he knows exactly about the 7th Cavalry, but I do think that he is a little bit more behind the scenes than he's letting on. I think there definitely is more going on there, and I am very much intrigued. It's just in this episode, while I understand the purpose of it, I don't really know where it's going, and I don't really know if we needed to have it in this episode. I think we honestly could have waited till episode 2, but other than that, this show pretty much blew me away. It did everything that I really needed it to do. I think they did an excellent job with building the tension, really getting us attached to these characters, and already just showing how high stakes it's going to be with the killing of Crawford and things like that. I'm so excited to see where the show ends up going. I know Jean Smart's character is coming in, who is actually going to be the daughter of the comedian, which is amazing. I love that we have that Silk Spectre is going to be in this show. I love that character in the movie, although I wasn't too fond of the performance in the movie. I love that character. I can't wait to see what they do with her, and I think she's going to do some great stuff. I know there's still other characters introduced like James Wolks and Han Chau's. I'm excited to see what they end up doing. But as a pilot, this show hooks you in incredibly well. It's some already very complex characters, some really high stakes, some incredibly intense action scenes, and just in general, does a great job of, really applying that Lindelofian formula to it, but also doing its own thing. Lindelof, I think, did such a great job with putting a stamp on this show already, but also showing how it is going to be different from Leftovers and things like that. Already, this is a show that I'm highly compelled by. I can't wait to talk to you guys more about it because I'm just loving what's going on here. I really adored pretty much everything about this first episode, and even things like I said, the one small flaw I have, it's not even really that it detracted from the episode. It's just, I don't know if it needed to be here. I don't know where that's going, and that's why I'm just a little bit skeptical of where that really is headed. But either way, guys, I adored this first episode. And I'm definitely going to give the first episode of Watchmen, Season 1, Episode 1, It's Summer and We're Running Out of Ice, overall, in A. Oh my god, it feels so good to have Damon Lindelof back on my TV screen. Guys, I am so excited to talk to you guys more about the show in the next 8 weeks. I know that this is seemingly going to be a one-season thing, but I can already definitely see them expanding it for sure. I'll get more into that as the show goes on. But either way, guys, let me know if you guys saw this first episode. Loved your thoughts on it. I'm just so happy that the show is finally on. I've been anxiously awaiting it, and oh my god, it's already really impressing me. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.